person, and then it was all monks, and that was it.
Right.
And a couple people from Ohio. And he did Amitabha over and over again, the whole practice over and over again for like 3 hours, mixed with the fire puja for the deceased. And during that, I became Chenrezig and he became Amitabha, like for real, in my own mind, I guess. And then I noticed that during the music, he was just smiling, and he had the bell in one hand, playing some sort of horn in another, doing the Damaru, and hitting a drum while cueing the monk to play the other stuff. All relaxed with a big smile. And I went, if you can do that, I can play these two things at once.
Yeah.
And then, so when I started doing it, I noticed that you're immediately in the moment. You're not thinking of how you're playing the drum or the horn, and you're not thinking of the practice. You're not thinking of the pain, because you're just doing two, and it's not automatic pilot either.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain.
It's that thing they call the zone, where you're in it, you're really in it.
Yeah.
You're like literally in this extended, it's present, but it somehow it's like that hallway that elongates. It just becomes very.
And then so when it comes time for the mantra part, I feel like I'm already really anchored because of this. And a lot of Vajrakalaya is huge for, at least for me, with sound and emptiness, the vibration of the different mantras, because there's, an infinite number of kalayas by that point,
Oh, yeah.
and they're all vibrating.
All around.
It's all audio to me. It's like a rigpa.
It's really a continuous miracle how skillful those practices are. I mean, we don't, and intellectually you don't realize it. It comes from doing it. But I know, Gretchen and I were at the Rochester Zen Center for until 1985, 1970, 72 to 85. So a long time. And stumbled into Tibetan Buddhism, not looking for anything, but knew that it was for us. And the skillfulness of the tantric practices are just, because, even in such a sort of mundane way or down to earth way, I had gone to these Yamataka retreats at Arizona, and they're exhausting physically, so you're always falling asleep and always this fighting sleep and like that. And then after a number of these, they asked if I would do some of the minor chanting in it, and because of having to do that, suddenly you weren't falling asleep anymore. It's so skillful. It's like you have to be there. So if you're just in meditating, it's just your mind. The mind goes everywhere. And of course, we're so habitual just following it and just being distracted. But if you have to somehow play an instrument, you have to pay attention, like when am I on and when, and all of this. And they have it, when you get into it even more, it's so completely mind-bogglingly nuanced and detailed. This is just like, I was just doing minor chanting, whereas the Russians especially, who were doing the elaborate chanting, it's unbelievably complicated, but they learn it. And so the effect of it is that your natural awareness is just there. Instead of trying to make it be there, it just reveals itself automatically from what you're doing. So it's amazing. It's amazing. It works on many different levels too, but that's just like the grossest level that I could mention. I threw the discus in college, and had this remarkable coach once upon a time. He had been, I think, in like 1932 Olympics or something. And he was this old school kind of guy, but had coached some of the world record holders at that time. And now he was really kind of on a hard luck. He had a little trouble with the bottle, but our coach had quit, gone to another college, so they needed someone to coach us. And they got this guy sort of as an ad hoc, and they had him living in this little room in the athletic center, like above the gym. But he was kind of like a genius as far as coaching goes. And so one of the things in the discus is that, you're spinning around this little 8-foot circle, and then you throw the thing like this. There's a tendency when you think about it that your arm moves up. So it's going on a smaller arc than what you want is this big arc. If you can relax, the discus is way behind you. And so you're actually working on it for a longer time. So it goes farther. But if you think about it, your arm goes like this, it's like, so you're always self-sabotaging yourself. But he had so much experience. So he just said, oh, no. Don't think about the discus going around. Think about your shoulder going around. And so when you're thinking about your shoulder, you naturally relax your arm. And the inertia, of course, as you're spinning, accelerating, it goes farther and farther back because of the natural physics of the thing. And so it's kind of like that with, this is a terribly, terribly gross, simple example. But with the Tantra and the visualizations, there's so much going on, and they're all sacred objects. This is the part where faith comes in, because normally just thinks, well, I can practice on a stone, I can practice on my breath, different objects of meditation. Normally, at least from my experience and the years that we were practicing Zen Buddhism, there wasn't any idea of a sacred object, that somehow a seed syllable has power in it and is actually a superior object to the stone or your breath or whatever else you want to do. But if you happen to stumble onto it, and then you have enough faith to be actually doing it, and enough to put up with the difficulties and the distractions and all of that, and you can actually experience like, oh my goodness, here. So the similar thing in Yamantaka, when they had me just do this very simple chanting, for the first time, I was able to stay awake through the whole practice sessions for the whole 9 days, because even though I was exhausted, your own social kind of ego is there. It's like, you can't goof up in front of all these people blowing a horn or whatever. So it is like your own ego is like kind of skillfully hooked into the practice for its own dissolution. I mean, it's just beyond me. It's skillful beyond skillful. It's like if I say, don't think about rhinoceros, you think about rhinoceros, but they have all these techniques that they get you thinking about the letter hung, and you forget about rhinoceros, you forget about your ego. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. Frank, I don't want to get you off your track because it's so good, but okay, so back to the fact that the rock and the breath aren't virtuous, and the reason that the hung works is because it's virtuous, and and it's got can you explain why a hung symbol is virtuous? Because
it is, you might say, like the first manifestation out of the Dharmakaya,
okay.
The vastness. Whereas a rock is our conceptual, that's how we see it.
Right, okay.
And even my breath, it's Frank's breath. So Frank is mixed in with that.
So there's just it doesn't matter. There are just predictable reactions and things that happen to you whenever you're in these transient higher states of being.
That hung comes from a higher state of being, you might say. It's not someone thinking up, here, let's use this as a clever object of meditation. Rather, it came out of the deep realization. And so that's why it's superior, because it is your true nature, but in a form matter, a subtle form that we can still more easily relate to because it's a form. We're used to dealing with forms.
Would it work with our alphabet?
Yeah, it would also work with a stone. I mean, you can do this, but the sort of the juice of all of this is that these are the methods that are said to be able to take you to Buddhahood in one lifetime, and that are especially valuable in times of degeneration, where the afflictive emotions, people people think the afflictions are good. I mean, they think non-virtue is good, and they think virtue is non-good.
If I were the devil, I would make that
Right, right, like that. So if you read about the time of the Buddha, I mean, people were coming to deep enlightenments, just hearing him talk.
Right. Yeah. It's,
And they were talking about the distractions in their time, but what were there? You're living in a village, I mean, there was no TV, no phone, no movies, and there wasn't a culture that was like promoting distraction all the time. Unbelievable. Wow. But we don't know that, we don't have a cultural sort of support for that. And it sounds, for most people, it sounds like they can't believe. But,
thank you, Frank.
you are welcome.
Wow.
Okay.
So you were talking about playing the horn in front of people. When I went to Arizona to do it, the very first time, I was like sweating and pacing back and 20 minutes before the first session in the morning.
Yeah.
And Garchin Rinpoche had come and had a private session with me that was supposed to be 40 minutes, and it was 3 hours the day
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, I'm fine. But then when it came time to do it, the lights were just getting turned on, and you realize that there's like 150 people in there,
Right.
and however many watching.
Right.
And
Right.
I've played as a musician. I've played in front of tens of thousands of people at festivals.
Uh-huh.
Live, and I was more nervous then. And the first section that I played, it was really tight and really tense. And then when we went to play the next section, he just reached down and touched my shoulder, and I looked up at his face, and he just started relaxed, and all of a sudden I was just relaxed. I wasn't perfect or anything by any means,
Right.
but all of a sudden, just because I was sitting next to him, it was like.
Right.
But the reason I got the mic before was I wanted to make an announcement. Just before I came here, I saw online that Drupal Rinchen Dorje is in the hospital.
Yeah.
And Garchin Rinpoche wants us all to do as many white taras as possible. I can share that on the White Lotus page, and the link if you want to send your accumulations into GBI. The dedication goes right to Drupal Rinchen Dorje.
Yeah, super do.
And I don't know what he's in. I don't know any of the details.
He had a fall, and some time ago, I don't know how long ago, but he has got some bleeding on the brain, and he didn't go to the hospital or any treatment or anything when it happened, and he was, I think, just the last couple of days, he was just kind of woozy, and so they sent him to the hospital. They had sent him when he first fell. I don't know, this seems like they didn't do a very thorough job. From what I understand, he went and they did blood tests and everything, no problem. But no one ever did anything with the head.
They're probably afraid to want to put it in a scanner.
With hair, maybe so. But nonetheless, with the wooziness, they went back and he's got some bleeding on the brain. So they're going to release that pressure. Yeah.
So he's mostly fine?
The feeling I got was, that it wasn't like critical, but I don't know. So we'll have to find out.
Well, it would be critical if he doesn't get the pressure release.
So I don't know the diagnosis. All that came through Tibetan gossip this afternoon.
Yeah, I just sent a text to Sultram.
Oh yeah, well, there you go. That's where you. Thank you, because that launched him into a search.
Now we'll all know.
Now we all know. Yeah, but yeah,
Right.
so do
Thank you.
absolutely.
Oh, also as an audio guy,
Yeah,
with this mic when we're not using it, just hit mute. Don't turn the power on and off because it snaps on the speaker.
okay, all right, great. Yeah, and also again, Rob, on playing the instruments. I mean, it is just so. All of this is so amazing, and there's actually kind of I don't know what to say, but there really is this need for a sufficient amount of faith for even the possibility of this to happen in anyone's life. And people hear that and then they think, oh boy, I don't have enough faith, and blah, blah, blah. It's not like that at all. If you're here and you even know the names of these people, or hear the names and you can't pronounce them, That's the sign. There's a sufficient amount of faith. Well, your story of Garin Pache and the instrument, Gretchen was once having a very hard time and had a crisis that happened right as she was flying out to Arizona. And she was in, the Yamataka, and she was just in a horrible state. And the first night, doing the late night mantra, Garin Pache, it's his time to sleep, but somehow he's roaming around. He sits next to her, just meditating with her. It cured everything. So, it's hard to believe, that someone can be that kind of sensitive. But when you experience it, it's just and it's not like any it's a blessing, but it's not a special, like, oh, you're a special person because this is happening to you. No, we all have the same Buddha nature. But it does strengthen one's, confidence. Because there's just so much, people talk about this, we all have it, this kind of human propensity of, if it's happening to me, it must not be special, It's like people who have some financial genius, investor genius living next door to them, but it's just Joe the neighbor. Whereas they get a call from some crazy man in some bucket shop out of Wall Street, out from Long Island. And they take that guy's advice because he's from out of town and they don't know him. So we're just so funny as human beings, all this self-destructive stuff, all in the attempt to be happy. It's really something. So the fact that you can see, the results in someone else, the whole point of the outer Lama is so you can discover your inner Lama. You see those qualities in someone else. And oddly enough, it's easier to have faith in someone else sometimes than it is to have faith in yourself, especially in this way. So it's so incredibly skillful because the Lama actually is a mirror that just holds up and you can see yourself perfectly, your fears, your hesitations, all the stupid things you do, but also the good things. We're very, very fortunate. We're just very fortunate. Okay, so that was a little bit of an aside. Sorry for all that, but yeah, we'll do some, remember to send your white Tara accumulations to Arizona. All right, so tonight we're finishing on profound Buddhism on the conventional Mahayana.
See me in my phone, I'm not being rude.
You're right.
Made a mistake of buying this on my phone. Now I gotta read it on my phone.
Again, this book is approaching the Dharma through how do we handle emotions. So I think it's very, helpful that because generally an American audience can hear that, there's so much. And of course, the first level of self-liberation that we've already concluded in the book, but is basically just staying away from the negative emotions. The word emotion, though, that they're using here in Sanskrit is klesha, and it's more than emotions. It's also our basically wrong thoughts and wrong conclusions about reality and about ourselves. It's basically everything that's filtering through our sense of an alienated ego, and then we see everything in terms of that. So they say it's like if you have a lens, but it's somehow stained. There are floaters in there, and there are different colors. You're seeing everything through a rosy tinge, or on a bad day through a gray tinge. Everything is colored by this lens of our mind. So the kleshas are in the path of self-liberation. We learn to we just abandon them. We just don't get into it with them. So we're learning to recognize them from our meditation and our daily experience. We recognize them as they arise. And of course, that immediately lessens their power, because the power that's total is when you don't see it coming. It's like you're blindsided, literally. It colonizes your mind in an instant, and it's like a demon taking you over. You're acting out of the klesha mind state, not your true nature. So that's self-liberation. But then now we're in the conventional Mahayana, and they're using the example here of transforming the emotions. sometimes in presentations of the conventional Mahayana, rather it's talked about the skillful use of the afflictive emotions. So for instance, you're meditating, anger comes up, and that you train yourself to recognize the anger, but instead of just like, I'm not going there, now you can use some of the afflictive emotions. And so for anger, we do this reactive thing where we understand we can use patience and we can use loving kindness and compassion. So in a sense, loving kindness and compassion, you might say are emotions too, but they actually, on the surface, they might be the surface of how they appear, but they're actually reflective of something much, much deeper. We're just seeing like the tip of the iceberg of the power of compassion or loving kindness. But the point is that we can use some of our emotions, but we're training to recognize the negative emotions, and then we use, someone said, it's like you take a little bit of them and you're making like a homeopathy. You take a little bit. It's like supposedly the cure of a hangover is to take a hair off of the dog that bit you. You take a little bit of the poison, and that kind of satisfies. So that's what we're doing again and again and again. So we'll finish the conventional Mahayana tonight, and we're on page 34. 44?
Are we on transforming pride at this point?
Yes.
It's page 45, I believe.
Thank you so much. We are, so sorry. We did three of them last week. The story of the merchant and the courtesan, transforming blindness, transforming desire, and transforming aversion. So now we're on transforming pride. Thank you, Rachel, page 45. All right, transforming pride. I am better than others. I am very intelligent. I am important. These thoughts, characterized by a strong attachment to me, constitute pride. When it occurs, one remains neutral without rejecting or following it. This is again in the conventional Mahayana. One simply remains in the mind, resting on this feeling without distraction. From now on, this pride, comparable to a mountain, is naturally flattened. Me loses its overvaluation. To the extent that we learn to meditate this way, the numerous opportunities for pride that arise in our mind are very beneficial, because they become the support for the development of the fifth perfection, the fifth paramita, that of concentration. At the same time, when pride, which is born from the assimilation to a me, is erased by looking at its essence, pride gives way to the perception of the absence of me. So this is a very profound little teaching in here. This word pride, I'm told in Tibetan there are 12 different words for pride. So again, they have this. It's useful because they have this kind of detail. The example that's sometimes given is supposedly, I don't know if it's true, but we all like to believe it. Supposedly the Eskimos have 13 different words for snow and ice because it matters to them, the different qualities, whatever. So the Tibetans do that with pride. And there is one pride, Vajra pride, in the Vajrayana, which is good. But it's more, I think, more unto arrogance. So when they say pride, it's more like the arrogance. The word in Tibetan has something to do with like the regal view, like above me, none, something like that. And that's it. You just take your view, whatever it is, as being the ultimate kind of thing, and everything else is below that. So you can see how that closes the mind. I mean, we see that, pride goeth before a fall. We know that in our literature and experience. But importantly, 12 different kinds of pride, and it's the arrogance quality of it that is really there. Okay. So transforming possessiveness or attachment. We are all conditioned by the totality of conflicting emotions. Among them, possessiveness, applied to our body, our house, to our belongings, is always present and strong. Whatever particular form it takes, we can neutralize it by generosity practiced at different levels. Giving of material goods constitutes the first degree. Giving of our family is the second one. Giving our blood and flesh is the highest form of generosity. Mahayana offers a great variety of ways to implement generosity in order to overcome possessiveness. In terms of the meditation that we want to practice now for this, when possessiveness appears, we process it like the preceding emotions. Without following or rejecting it, we simply stay within its basic feeling. In this way, ordinary possessiveness will become a feeling of neutral ease. Its harmful characteristic will be spontaneously erased. As possessiveness disappears, it is automatically transformed into its opposite, fundamental generosity. Again, this text is giving a very, very brief introduction, just sort of like a tip of the tongue taste of some of these great concepts. But these different levels of generosity, Lama Tarchin would teach, for instance, to get over the obstacles to generosity are what? Well, basically stinginess. That's the biggest thing. There are different types of laziness that they teach about, but basically the stinginess of generosity. We just cling. And he said this is one of the skillful things about the offering bowls and the water, because in giving water, no one's attached to water to that degree. And water is pure. Everyone feels positive about water for drinking, cleaning, bathing. And so by visualizing the water as the offering substance and then making that as vast as we can with our mind, you get over your natural stinginess. Another thing he said was to take something in your right hand and give it to your left hand and just give it back and forth. So you get the habit of giving going. Then it becomes a little bit easier. When, someone stops you in the street and wants $5 to save the whales, your habit is that you can spontaneously do it. But it's a challenge. Now, Kempo was giving teachings a couple of weeks ago, on the different aspects of the perfection of giving. And of course, the more we learn about these, how helpful it is. This first level of giving is giving material things. Someone, needs money, someone needs food, someone needs medicine, whatever it is. The second level of perfection of giving is the protection of fear, to protect someone who's fearful in whatever way, either by talking to them or providing protection, whatever. But the third level is the giving of Dharma. And this is not only sharing the teachings, but just when you're acting dharmically with other people. That has an effect. We never really know our effect of others or what works or what, but there is an automatic power of compassion. The Dharma is the teachings of wisdom. When we have internalized things and even act in a single moment, just according to the Dharma, spontaneously, unself-consciously, that has a power. I think she was in, I can't remember, one of my daughters, it was Megan, I think she was like in, I don't know what grade she was in, maybe it was like 4th grade or 5th grade or something. And years later, we happened to bump into her teacher. And, we were saying, how are you? Haven't seen you in, 15 years, whatever it was. And we sat down and she told us the story. She said, I just remember your daughter because I was always happy she was in my classroom. But there was one day, like this time of the year, when the windows were open in the school. And a bee came in, and a bee was buzzing around the room. And a couple of the boys, they grabbed a stick or something, and they were going to kill that bee, and they were running all over the room trying to catch it. But my daughter beat them to it and caught it in a cup and covered it over, and then just took it out and released it. The teacher was really moved by that. So you never know. You never know what really affects someone. Thich Nhat Hanh said that when people were fleeing Vietnam, they'd be in the South China Sea, big boats of refugees fleeing, and they were being preyed upon by pirates in the South China Sea. It was a terrible thing, and they all knew about the pirates, so it was, big fear. But he said if there was one person, they reported to him that if there was one person in the boat that somehow was calm, maintained their calm, it affected everyone in a positive way. And with more people calm, there was less, then the pirate was less fearful, less bad things happened. So this is, very powerful stuff. Possessiveness. Then transforming jealousy. Jealousy is comparable to a thorn. It not only pricks others, it also turns itself against the one who conceives it, making this person very uneasy and miserable. Each time that jealousy arises, we simply stay poised within it without following or rejecting it. It will only automatically quiet itself and will no longer be able to prick us. Spontaneously, it will rejoin its essence that is inner peace. Jealousy is transmitted into peace. From the point of view of the 6 perfections, it is associated with the 4th one, diligence. We have seen briefly how to approach the 6 main conflicting emotions through meditation. You should apply yourself to transforming the first 3, desire attachment, hatred aversion, and blindness. In this way, desire attachment will be transformed into empty felicity, hatred aversion into empty clarity, and blindness into knowledge. This shows the effect this beneficial meditation has on the emotions. The 3 basic emotions are, for us, the most abundant source of negative acts, problems, and suffering, which is the reason we should approach them first. The other 3, possessiveness, pride, and jealousy, are only corollaries. All the conflicting emotions originate from the mind. We will conclude by staying a moment in the emptiness of the mind. Then we will dedicate the merit of this teaching and practice for the benefit of all beings. Let me say on this, again, Kala Rinpoche was the holder of, again, I think it's the Shagpa Kagyu. So again, these 4 great schools of Tibetan Buddhism as they developed in Tibet. One, the Nyingma, means the ancient ones. These are the translations, the text that came from India, like in the 800s, 900s, up to the 1200s. So there's like 400 years. These are the Nyingma. Then the new schools are called Sarma, and there are 3 of them. The Kagyu, which is the one that we find ourselves in. Ka is speech, Gyu is secret speech. It's highly esoteric. The Kagyu. There's the Sakyas. Sakya means like gray earth, I think. It comes from a place in Tibet that you see pictures of it. It's very gray. And then there's the Geluk. So the Dalai Lama is in the Geluk, Gelukpa. It means shining virtue, something like that. They're the most recent one, I think, from the late 1300s, 1400s. In the Kagyu, there are 12 different like sub-schools, sub-Kagyu schools. We ourselves are in the Drikun Kagyu, which is one of the 4 biggest ones in terms of number of adherents. The Shakpa Kagyu was one of the 8 smaller ones. So this is a little bit different presentation than we often hear that Kempo would be saying, for instance. For instance, on the type of meditation or the conventional Mahayana method used. So a little bit different, but you see, the differences, Garambache says, are like different facets of a beautiful jewel. It's not that one is right and one is wrong. It's just not that kind of exclusionary thinking. It all comes down to practice and the discovery of our true nature. So the conventional Mahayana, its greatness is that basically it's just teaching emptiness and karma, cause and effect. That's the basic teaching. It's said that, we fly to Buddhahood on 2 wings. One is wisdom, which is emptiness, and the second wing is compassion, which is skillful means, which is knowledge of karma, cause and effect. Those are the 2 things. Cause and effect, karma, is the relative aspect, and wisdom is the absolute aspect. These are all the teachings of bodhicitta. Again, absolute bodhicitta, abiding in the nature of the mind. Relative, conventional bodhicitta is the means by which we come to realize absolute bodhicitta. So the relative bodhicitta is divided between aspirational and engaging relative bodhicitta. Aspirational, of course, is, I want to go to Washington, D.C. Engaging bodhicitta is taking one step towards Washington, D.C. It's actually walking, doing it, engaging. There's a verse in Shantideva about the power of this engaging conventional relative bodhicitta. And that is, it says that once this is awakened in the mind, when one starts to practice engaged bodhicitta on this relative, conventional, you could say dualistic level of all our human beings, something that we can all do, that blessings flow in huge waves, even during our sleep, that it is just the most, it's the cause of Buddhahood. And so these are the teachings of the conventional Mahayana. And by conventional, it's nothing conventional about it in the terms of, worldly experience or words. But the great teachings of emptiness and the great teachings of cause and effect. This is the basic of the conventional Mahayana. And the path is the path of the 6 perfections. Sometimes it's called the Paramita Yana, the career of the Paramitas, the career of the transcendent perfections. And so again, this is what Kempo has been teaching on, and of course is in our 37 practices, starting with generosity, then ethics, then patience, then joyful effort, perseverance, dedication, joyful, then concentration, and then wisdom itself. The first 5 are cause and effect. The 6th one is the result, or wisdom, the absolute. Now, it's interesting to me that Kala Rinpoche in this book, here we are, was it 200 pages, I think, basically. And so we've finished self-liberation. We've also finished the conventional Mahayana, and we're, page 48, 50. So a fourth of the book is those 2, and the rest was going to be the Tantra. There are reasons for that, for sure. But nonetheless, he has a special kind of approach, which I assume is the approach that the Shakpa Kagyu, use. It's just the teaching style. Okay, first, any questions on that? Other than that, we're going to start something in Tantra. Yes?
Could you define skillful? Because I noticed you use it in a weird way.
Mm-hmm. Skillful is with the motivation of wanting to come to Buddhahood in order to liberate all beings. Skillful is anything that helps another being along in that way. One of the teachings on our true nature, it's limitless. They talk about the 3 aspects of our true nature, and one of the ones that you hear about, Dalai Lama talks, the Dharmakaya, the body of the Dharma, the body of truth. And when they say body, it's not like, like a body. It means like a body of knowledge or like that. So the Dharmakaya is said to be like space. There's nothing you can say about it. It's just vast. You can't say that it's small. You can't say that it's big. It's just, vast. So our true nature is limitless. And so too is compassion. Compassion is skillful means. But because it's limitless, it means that it's not just by the book. One of the first great Indian masters to go to Tibet from India, Asanga, he apparently went to some big monastery in Tibet and was talking to the Tibetans, and he was saying, what do you do here? Well, we do these practices, and how do you do them? And he said, by the book. And Asanga said, in that case, you're all going to hell. Because if you limit yourself in a conventional way, it's not skillful. we've seen this in kind of fundamentalist kind of mindset where people are forcing something on someone just because they think they have to follow a rule in that way. So the skillfulness is, although the Dharma says the non-virtue is lying and makes bad karma, and the virtuous thing is telling the truth, at the same time, when the Nazis come to your house and say, is Anne Frank here? And she is, you say no. That's being skillful. But again, the skillfulness of this, or the discipline of it, it's not apart from discipline. And so in other words, this can't be done for egoistic reasons. You can't say, well, since I can lie, apparently, if I'm talking about saving Anne Frank, then maybe just to save my bad feelings or my ego, I'm going to lie about something too. So there's no free lunch, is what I'm saying. But the skillfulness of it is all these methods and how they actually assist people along the path towards Buddhahood. I don't know if that helps.
So my toolkit is kind of the teachings and the way of the Buddha. That's how you can be skillful.
Yeah.
Crafty.
Yeah. Your skillfulness is the tool itself, but it's also how that's used and applied. Again, like a great master can sort of maybe get away with some stuff, so to speak, but it's still having this beautiful effect. Oh yeah, right. Rogo.
Love your question. So if you're doing the skillful means with the conscious understanding that you're doing something to benefit other people, never mind.
It depends on the level. I mean, it depends on the level.
No, okay, yeah, because
again, there's a Chinese poem about how is bodhicitta practiced, and the example that's given in this poem, it said it's like grabbing your pillow in the middle of the night. So you're sleeping in the middle of the night, and somehow you're a little bit off or something. A person grabs the pillow. They're not thinking, I need to do something to benefit myself. I'm not thinking how skillful I am grabbing the pillow. You're not having any thoughts like that at all. It's just, but that's it's a very high level. Spontaneous, just flowing out of the mind that's trained. But for the rest of us, no problem thinking, I want to help this person. So you're trying to do what's skillful. You're knowing that, if I just say that right now, that's just going to blow up on him. The Buddha himself, when he was asked, is there a self? Most of the time he said no, but there were times when he said yes, depending on who he was talking to. Yeah, right. Right. So there's one story, for instance, where he was like confronted in a kind of an angry way by a Brahmin. And instead of getting into some tit for tat or some sort of, religious dispute or whatever, he asked the man, so you follow a Brahma, right? Or Indra, I can't remember what the Indian deity that he was following. And he said, yes. And so the Buddha said, well, is Brahma wise? Yes. Is Brahma compassionate? Yes. Is Brahma skillful? Yes. Is Brahma generous? Yes, all these things. He said, then you do like Brahma. Because again, it comes down to us. Okay.
So is it intention mixed with bodhicitta and experience? But bodhicitta is loving kindness, compassion.
Yeah.
The relative bodhicitta.
Yeah.
So wouldn't the answer to his question just be intention mixed with bodhicitta? Maybe you get better at it with a little bit of experience.
Yeah. And to the point where, like a mother, when the child's running out in front of traffic, the mother doesn't have any thought like, gee, I shouldn't let that happen. Her love for her child is such that it's just permeating everything she does. And so, just naturally you do. So the same thing with the bodhisattva. With full training, there's no need for conception even. It's just perception, and there's a natural kind of flow.
In psychology, they say that there's with people with anxiety or depression or bipolar, there's a thought chain that just keeps going, and one thought jumps on to the next one, and it just keeps going. And there was one point in my life to where if I was in a situation where someone was gonna get hit by a car in traffic, I would literally still be thinking out the steps of, do I grab this person, this stranger, and pull them back? Especially when I lived in LA, and
Mhm.
and it was like, and it was weird because it wasn't skillful at all. It was very me getting in the way of myself to
Yeah,
help
yeah.
somebody, like,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And then I learned about the thought chains and all that kind of stuff, and then I stumbled into here.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, so it does. The mind is tricky.
Yeah, the mind is very tricky and been kicking us around for lifetimes. And also, it's kind of like the example I gave of just thinking about the shoulder and not the hand with the discus in it. Because it's like that. In other words, what's skillful? When we're meditating, for the first time, you're sitting there and you're trying to maintain awareness, mindfulness of a particular object in meditation. It can be different, all sorts of different things. But what you're doing is that you're cutting that loop. I mean, again, it's like when you look at the movie, we don't see that it's all these, of course, I'm not out of the digital age, but it's not all those individual frames. But when they're moving fast, it appears like it's a solid thing happening. And yet it isn't like that. That's just the appearance. And so too with this loop of our thought that we do again and again and again, it happens so rapidly that it's real to us. And so with meditation, one of the things that naturally happens is you're breaking that loop. Even if you're just like fighting with yourself for 20 minutes until they ring the bell and I get to move again. You know, you can be in meditation, you're just saying, or there may be some obsessive thought like, oh, you know, I forgot to turn off the stove or whatever it is, you know, something, here's what I'm going to do when I get out of this retreat. Man, I'm just going down there and having a milkshake and then I'm having a margarita. You know, you got this obsessive thought going on. But then suddenly when the retreat's over, you don't even do that stuff because it isn't affecting you anymore. You've cut that loop. And so it's so skillful because, again, if you say, I'm not going to think about rhinoceros, you think about rhinoceros. But instead, they have you doing these other things, looking at the nature of your mind. And we have to believe the text, but you can see it in your own life to one degree or another. And you can certainly see it in the great masters, that vastness. And again, Garamche is such a wonderful example because how do you say the right thing all the time? You know, when do you know when to say something, when to say nothing? It's not in an organizational kind of even therapeutic way. It's dealing with our true nature. What is going to help you, you know, give you more confidence to allow you to practice to do the right thing? There's a level of this that is beyond kind of like conscious intention. And then there's a natural kind of thing. The example you've heard me give too is like, you know, I think about in basketball, for instance, like LeBron James going for the basket. It's totally powerful, but it's totally without thought. You know, he's not looking at the guy on his right and say, oh, I shouldn't go there. You know, he's not having a debate about it. He's done so much training that it's become internalized and just completely free flowing and positive as far as getting to the basket. Everything he's doing is this training that's happened. Can't happen without the training. You know, you have someone like has tremendous skill, tremendous physical stature and all of that, but without the training, it doesn't happen. So we're the same way. We've got this Buddha nature, but yet paradox of paradoxes, we have to train ourselves to realize it because it's so covered over with all our stuff. The good thing about it is some sort of insight into it, you realize just how completely deluded we are. And of course, that's the challenge. Remember, the Buddha came to his great awakening, hesitated to teach. He just thought, you know, human beings are going to goof this up. They're going to use it for fame and gain. And, you know, that happens for sure. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Can I just like talk about a situation that I'm in,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully you can help me? Like, so I mentioned I was always educated by Jesuits for like 10 years, and they always taught me to ask too many questions and overthink everything, and it ended up being overkill.
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of ruined my life because when I got into the workplace, always questioning things too much, and I'm miserable because the mind just keeps running. Even when I should be just relaxed in a simple situation. And it's kind of like one of my favorite movies is this movie called Inception. And
I don't know it.
You have to watch it because Leonardo DiCaprio, like in the movie, he has this wife that died. She committed suicide, but they're in this dream. That's their business. But in this dream, the wife keeps coming back, and he just can't get her out of his head. And like he has to, because all the lives of his friends and colleagues depend on it. Basically, it's kind of hard to explain the premise, but I just can't turn off my mind. And it's it's like you have a muscle that's been exercised so much, and then you get into the real world and it's like, oh, you actually you need to calm it down, and now it's making me miserable.
Well, that is the state of human beings, really, especially ones who are in our modern kind of educated way. We give a reality to the concepts, and we think that the way to happiness is like our unstated assumption is kind of thinking about it and working all that stuff out. And oddly, Buddhism is the middle way. So if you think about it, in every situation, it's like this harmonious middle way that is actually the reality of the situation. So if you have over here unstoppable thinking and thoughting going on, and then if you have over here, which is just being a blank, Buddhism's the middle way. So it uses our propensities, because we do think, we can't suppress our thought. But in meditation, you start to see the nature of the thought rather than having, all sorts of power that we give it by not seeing its nature. So what I mean is, for instance, in the simple thing of like meditating for 20 minutes, and you, again, like I mentioned, you have a thought, I really need to get up and do this. And so in our normal life, well, we do, because that thought is so powerful to us for whatever reason. But in meditation, you're not doing that. So you have the experience of not giving into that thought. And then afterwards, well, nothing bad happened. So you're actually, it's said through the concentration practices, the mind calms down, calm abiding, it's called. And the experience is one of just having more space. So you're still having the thought, but instead of being kicked around by the thought, you have the ability to pick and choose, discriminating, transcendent wisdom. So it helps, but it takes work. It takes work. The meditation itself has that effect. Even if we don't want it to have that effect, it has that effect. And the genius of it is that we're just simply doing the practice, working on our motivation, working on our sincerity in that. But at the same time, the practices work. And that's an amazing thing, because even with doubts, I can't tell you. I mean, my past experience was all with a certain kind of meditation I was very happy with it, didn't have any dissatisfaction, but I had no faith in mantra at all. I thought that was like it's a lower kind of practice. People just babbling like a parrot, I'm practicing in the mind, as if your speech isn't mind too. And so again, you do stuff because you're in a group of people that are doing it, and I can't be the only one here not doing it, and the teacher might see me not doing it. All this kind of ego kind of things that we do with ourselves. But then you can experience something, in the mantra, and you go, oh my goodness, I've been just doing this like a parrot for no particular purpose, and now at least I get a little idea that there's something valid here. So like that. But the thinking and the thoughting, that's our kind of our modern disease. We're very highly trained in thought and thinking in that.
One thing, if I may, I've always unfortunately been the one, and this is a pride issue too. I've always done everything in a unique way. It's just something that's naturally happened, and I worry that let's say when I arrived here, it's a very clean water here.
Yeah.
But I always end up poisoning the well.
Uh-huh.
I can't control this,
Uh-huh.
and then I end up asking a question or something that ruins it. And maybe I don't know how much an element of innovation is here. Like, so you said you don't want to be fundamentalists, you don't want to
Yeah.
follow exactly, but how do you avoid becoming poison?
We work on motivation. You can be fundamentalist as hell. There's nothing wrong with that. But it just isn't the ultimate thing. So when you get into some really serious problem, there can be solutions that are so forgive me, those of you who have heard this before, but the story, to give you an idea of this, of Garchen Rinpoche. So he was at Harvard teaching, he was going to teach at the divinity school, giving a lecture. And my daughter was a student there, and she was going to translate for him. So he was staying at a house of the woman who was sponsoring his visit to Boston. And she had renovations going on in the house, drywall, that kind of stuff going on, and guys in there working. And so one of the guys, said, where's your bathroom? I need to go to the bathroom. She directs him. He walks into the bathroom. Gar Rinpoche is taking a bath in the tub. Nobody knew. So first of all, you have to kind of know him, but he's got this huge head, and he's always doing a prayer wheel. He spins his prayer wheel. And my first thought when I heard the story was, I wonder if he's doing the prayer wheel in the tub, because he's always doing the prayer wheel. But anyhow, naked man in the tub. And, the worker comes in. And of course, we're Americans, basically a Protestant culture. I can't be in the bathroom with someone else. This is private space, everything. And so he's going to walk out. And Gar Rinpoche, somehow, he doesn't speak any English, but he's very expressive and just like, yeah, come on, just this guys, come on in here. It's fine. I'm in the tub. Who cares? That's the vibe that he had. So the guy comes in. Somehow he's convinced to come in. He's standing in front of the toilet to urinate, but he's got this naked man in the tub behind him. So nothing is happening, right? He's just there like frozen. At that point, he hears Garchen Rinpoche closing the shower curtain. He relaxes. The urine flows. He walks out. And later that weekend, he took refuge. He formally became Buddhist with the Garchen Rinpoche. And he told Tana Peso, the hostess, she said, I don't know anything about Buddhism, but I know that guy knows my mind. But this is how the teachings are done. He is an incredible being. He knows, you can read his books. It's just like, I just can't believe it. And it just pours out of him. So he has all that kind of conceptual knowledge too. I don't think it's conceptual knowledge for him. I think it's just expression, but that's just my opinion. But what I'm saying is that that's skillful. Yeah.
You left out Garchen Rinpoche's syllable.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, right. I'm getting old. Yeah. When the guy started could finally, the urine started to flow, Garchen Rinpoche behind him went, ah. Sorry. Thank you, Rob. Right. It's emptiness, right? It's emptiness. Every Sanskrit letter has ah in it. It's like its form is emptiness, emptiness is form.
Have you seen the commercial for Avalara? It's this consulting company.
No.
And they show these stressed business people in the office, and then this people come, and then they take care of everything, all the accounting, everything, and everyone goes, Avalara. They show them how it's all the situations, and they're completely relaxed.
Right.
It's a really effective commercial.
Right. It's great. It's great. It's really great. So now we move on to, again, the Tantra. So again, Buddhism is divided between self-liberation and the full Buddhahood. One who attains to full liberation is called an arhat, means a conqueror, and is very high, sort of advanced state. But Buddhahood is said to be greater because it involves omniscience, not just freedom from suffering, but total skillfulness, compassion, omniscience, even. Remarkable. And so in the Mahayana, there are the two divisions. There's the what we've been talking about, the path of the perfections, and then there's the Vajrayana, it's called, or the Tantra Yana. The difference is in the conventional Mahayana, which is virtually the entire Buddhist world, the idea is that we're practicing like generosity, we're practicing meditation, we're practicing all these virtuous things because based on cause and effect, that's going to result in the effect that we're actually looking for. So we're practicing the causes of Buddhahood, the causes of happiness, the causes of liberation. In the Tantra, it recognizes that we actually are Buddhas right now. So we're actually practicing the result rather than practicing the cause, we're practicing the result. Because if you visualize yourself as a Buddha and you're practicing on your Buddha nature, even if you haven't recognized that Buddha nature, what happens is the qualities of Buddha nature start to permeate your mind. And this is said to be especially powerful, but it's also especially dangerous because whereas in the self-liberation, we just stay away from the negative emotions, in the conventional Mahayana, we're allowed to use desire, love and compassion for others, desire for freedom, all these, the desire aspect of our mind. It's not like we're rejecting all of that. We're able to use that skillfully. But in the Tantra, we can use everything, including anger. So normally, in the other paths, you stay away from anger because it's just so powerful, so destructive, and so immediate. But in the Tantra, everything can be used. So it has special dangers and therefore special protections that come along with it. The books on the Tantra tend to be even thicker because of this wanting to avoid misunderstandings. And because it's dealing with very subtle mind states that can be used, can be experienced, can be manipulated, you might say, in order to get this tremendous result. So the rest of this book is going to be on these methods in the Tantra. The important thing to understand is that the Tantra results in Buddhahood, conventional Mahayana results in a Buddhahood. So the end result is the same. Sometimes the methods are a little different, but actually one includes the other two. There's no contradiction between the conventional Mahayana and the Tantra Yana, because when you visualize yourself as a Buddha, that Buddha is full of loving kindness and compassion, full of wisdom, emptiness at the same time. Again, the skillfulness is different. Go ahead.
It would make it dangerous real fast, like, because if I start saying I'm the Buddha,
Right.
wouldn't that be I'm proud and I'm getting arrogant all of a sudden? And in the Catholic or Muslim religions, you're not even supposed to picture God. You're too dirty. You're not worthy.
Right. Right. Excellent point.
I just want to understand.
You're absolutely right. It's a difference in view. Because again, Buddha was talking about at his time, he said there were 360 different views sort of competing with each other in northern India. He said 180 of these were nihilistic, sort of like our modern atheism or agnosticism, materialism. If I can see it, that's real. Everything else isn't real. We're just mindless protoplasm, mindlessly mutating kind of thing. So all those nihilistic views are wrong. The other side is the eternalistic side, where it's better than the nihilism because there is a basis for morality more than just your own feelings. But at the same time, it posits a creator God, and then the rest of us are creatures. And there's a gap that you have to have there, because that's, great heresy. You say, I am God. Yeah, Christianity and Judaism in the end.
So how do I reconcile?
Well, the Buddha said his view was the middle way. The middle way. So when you have an understanding of what a Buddha is, that arrogance isn't there. But at the same time, some of the protections that come in just with this are certain kinds of vows with other people, so they have, you're grounded, so to speak. And certainly working with a teacher, because a teacher can help with those kinds of things, divert them, even by just having no interest in what you're doing. Get deflated, so to speak. Very kind, though, I must say.
Parents are like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
You are stretched from the ordinary. I know it's extraordinary person.
Yeah. And also the practices themselves inculcate the positive mind states and the virtuous mind states. And so by learning them, for one thing, you learn sort of pitfalls not to go into, but also the effect of itself. I mean, the effect of, for instance, you can practice in the Tantra, a very wrathful looking Buddha. It looks like it's a demon or something. But the mantra itself is like very sweet. And the effect of it is you do all of this, and then, oh my goodness, your mind is peaceful. So sometimes the appearances are misleading, but it's just what you're pointing out. You want to have the right effect of the mind. And that was the teachings on arrogance that we were just talking about. You learn to look for that and see it as it arises.
Honestly, it does help a lot though. As a beginner, if I just picture myself as Buddha or put myself in his shoes, it's like a quick role model that helps me to get in that mode.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it's a shortcut for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to give you an idea, not to interrupt you, to give you an idea, even just the conventions, like when you put your hands together, people come into a temple and put their hands together and bow. Well, first of all, you can't be 110% arrogant and bow at all. Even if you're thinking I'm bowing so that I'm going to get more power, you're still having to go through the appearance of having some sort of humility. So even there, you're practicing humility. And if you have your hands like this, the effect is different from this. It's just so remarkable how there's just really one body-mind thing going on. We think of it as two different things, but this has an effect. Also, taking the shoes off. I mean, it's great for cleanliness and that, but it's also out of respect. It gets you in your basic human state. We come into this world naked. We go out that way too. But at the same time, you can get in an argument with someone when your shoes are off, but somehow you're just not as completely a jerk as when you have shoes on. I don't know what it is about it, but it's very, very skillful. So these things all have positive effect. And similarly with the meditations, the hand gestures, the mudras, the concepts, all of these things.
I resent this fucking that came out of the pandemic because, in ancient cultures, they always bow and handshake. You're opening yourself.
Yeah.
Thank for the night.
Yeah, right.
Got it.
Right.
This fuck is a flat.
Right.
I do the elbow one, then I hug them. It's really great to do with people who have masks.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, the mic. We need the mic.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. All right. For just a little introduction then to conclude tonight. This will lead into Kala Rinpoche. We'll start next week with him. This is from a statement from the Dalai Lama. And his writings are just so, inspiring, but not in some sort of emotional way, but just, so impressive. This man was the head of the government. It's like, I can't imagine any other. Of course, he's not a politician, but nonetheless. So this is his introduction to the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And I'll read just a little bit of this because he's talking about the Tantra. It starts out, which I won't read, a big discussion of the continuation of consciousness, because he's writing for a Western audience. And a big question is, we had it at the Folk Art Guild the other day. What continues? Is there anything? Is there such a thing as rebirth? I give the Dalai Lama such credit. He comes right up with this issue, and he's talking about this. We'll read this in the future, but talking about what the Buddhist view of this is. But he's getting into it because this particular book, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is describing a process. There's two types of rebirth. One is what we think of in this gross way, our body dies, then the clarity of the mind is revealed. First there's darkness, then the clarity of the mind, its pure natural state arises, but of course we miss that. and then this whole intermediate state where there's a form and existence, but it's not substantial. It's mental, illusory body. And then the substantiality comes back as we get farther and farther away from our true nature in the form of birth. And we find ourselves with a material body. Well, the tantric techniques use that same dissolution of our body, the recognition of the nature, the creation of an illusory body, uses all of that in this lifetime. Because there is the rebirth of one lifetime after another, but there's also the rebirth that's taking to us every instantaneous minute right now. We are actually dying completely right now and being reborn. This is hard, because we don't see it. Again, it's like the movie, the individual frames. It looks like there's three-dimensional activity going on there. There's a reality on that screen, but we don't see the actual process itself. Yet we know, even science, I don't know if this number is true, but you used to hear that every 7 years, every cell in your body was replaced. And yet we still say, it's still me, still me. Or if you look, with my granddaughters, it's just amazing. It brings up memories of my own childhood. And you just think, you see a picture of yourself at 4 years old. Somehow I say that's the same person, but everything's different. So we don't see that instantaneous rebirth, but the tantric practice uses this natural process that's going on a very subtle level. So just to give a brief introduction to it. And he talks about the different levels of motivation, for instance. He said the actual preparation depends on each individual's depth of spiritual aspiration. For example, if an individual is simply seeking favorable rebirth as a human being, there's no need to engage in sophisticated meditative path related to the process of death and rebirth. Simply to live a virtuous life is seen as sufficient. Similarly, in the case of those who are seeking personal liberation from conditioned existence, and also in the case of those whose practice is confined to the sutric, that's the conventional level, of the Mahayana, their meditative preparation will be limited to ensuring the attainment of successive forms of existence that will be conducive to the continuation of their journey towards enlightenment. For these three kinds of individuals, no actual techniques for utilizing the time of death as an essential element of the spiritual path have been set down in classical Buddhist literature. Nevertheless, since the understanding of the process of death, the intermediate state, and rebirth are crucial to our understanding of the nature of this very existence, we do find extensive discussion of these three processes, even in the texts which relate to the aspirations of those three kinds of persons. It is exclusively in Tantra, however, and particularly in highest Yoga Tantra, that the methods for utilizing the process of death, the intermediate state, and rebirth are specifically taught as the basis for achieving liberation from cyclic existence. These methods involve the development of a skillful relationship with certain experiential stages that an individual actually induces with the intention of enhancing spiritual realization and the fruition of their capacities as a human being. Generally speaking, the practices of highest Yoga Tantra present a spiritual path which enables the individual to attain complete Buddhahood within a single lifetime, prior to the moment of death. Yet for those who are unable to achieve this, it becomes crucial to use the transformative opportunities offered by the naturally occurring processes of death, the intermediate state, and rebirth. Hence, in highest Yoga Tantra, it is not merely the preparation for a more developed future rebirth which is important, but of more fundamental significance is the personal preparation for using one's own death and subsequent states as a means of achieving liberation. And one more paragraph. He's talking about highest Yoga Tantra. In the new schools, there are said to be 4 levels of Tantra. increasing in subtlety. The first one is Upa Tantra, I believe. I confused the first two. Upa Tantra, then there's Charya Tantra. The next one is Yoga Tantra. Yoga is union. And then there's the highest Yoga Tantra, the highest union. So that's what we're talking about here. The lower tantrics use, for instance, incredible ritual development. You have to change your clothes 3 to 4 times a day, 10 times a day, I can't remember. Only eat out of copper vessels. There's all this outer purification that you're using to inculcate inner purification. But nonetheless, the highest Yoga Tantra is what he's talking about here. In the Nyingma, the old school, it has those 4 levels too, but the highest level, highest Yoga Tantra, is divided into 3. One is Maha Yoga, which is the creation stage, you might say, of yourself as a Buddha. The next one is Anu Yoga, which is the perfection stage, the mind of that created Buddha. And then the highest is Ati Yoga. Ati Yoga is the same as Dzogchen in Tibetan. Ati is Tibetan. So we're talking about the same thing here. There's some subtle differences between the Nyingma and the Sarma, but nonetheless, in the literature of highest Yoga Tantra, the 3 realms of conditioned existence into which a human being may be born are described in terms of differing expressions or modalities of energy, lung, prana. And it is said that our fundamental ignorance is the root of conditioned existence, and that karmic energy is its activating force. So again, the fundamental basis of our conditioned existence is ignorance. That means not knowing. And karma is the force, is the activating energy. Further, from the tantric perspective, death, the intermediate state, and rebirth are also seen as nothing other than differing modalities of karmic energy. The point at which the gross levels of energy are completely dissolved and only the subtle energies remain is called death. The stage at which these energies unfold into a more manifest form is the intermediate state, and the stage at which they eventually manifest substantially is called rebirth. Thus, all 3 states are differing manifestations of energy. Based on this understanding, since death is the state when all the gross levels of energy and consciousness have been dissolved and only the subtle energies and consciousnesses remain, it is possible for an advanced yogi to meditatively induce a state which is almost identical to the actual experience of death. This can be achieved because it is possible to meditatively bring about the dissolution of the gross levels of energy and consciousness. When such a task is accomplished, the meditator gains an enormous potential to progress definitively in his or her spiritual practice. For at the stage when the experience of fundamental inner radiance is genuinely affected through such a method, the yogin gains the capacity to actualize the illusory body of the meditational deity, thus ensuring the realization of perfect Buddhahood in this lifetime. So that's rather heady, you know. We're throwing you into postgraduate level of study. But what I think, first of all, in my own limited way, is that this is the Dalai Lama writing this. You know, this is the guy that you see going around the world smiling, saying, be kind, I'll be joyful, all these things. I'm a human being. I'm just a simple monk, blah, blah. I mean, all that's true, but that's the teaching that each one of us actually is a Buddha. So in a sense, we're just learning how to become fully a human being instead of the image of a human being that we carry around of ourselves. But we'll do more. Obviously, the rest of this book is on the Tantra. And it's, heady stuff, but at the same time, it's sort of what distinguishes Tibetan Buddhism, you may say. The Tantra is also in Japan, was in China too, but they're rare or more rare teachings than, but they're not different than the teachings of emptiness, the teachings of vast loving kindness and compassion, and karma, cause and effect. Yeah, it's in Russia too. Yeah. In Mongolia. Yeah. And yeah, also that's something to think about too. I mean, again, the more we know even about the history, I find helpful because it gives us confidence.
It's weird to see like these with Russian looking people.
Yeah, right. But for instance, the Genghis Khan, obviously this great conqueror, conquered all the way from Japan, really, all the way to the Caspian Sea. Huge. His grandson was trying to conquer, Kublai Khan was trying to conquer Tibet, and the Tibetans talked him out of it. Now, can you imagine? And they said, look, we'll do a deal with you. We'll give you the Dharma, these teachings. And, you can sort of rule us. You can be like our governor, but just don't destroy us. I mean, I think there's a lot for us to learn in there. How do we relate? How do different countries relate to each other? And so anyway, the Mongolians became Tantric Buddhist. Yeah. So and all the way with the old Soviet Union, all these different, the Union of USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, they had all these different, I think 13 different republics within the old Soviet Union. And one of them was Kalmykia. And the Kalmyks are Kalmyk Mongol. They're on the shore of the Caspian Sea. They're just, when the Mongolian Empire receded, these people were left there. So when we were in Moscow with Garbachev doing Vajrakalaya, there was one Kalmykian Mongol there who had met Garbachev, and he had taken a bus from Kalmykia to Moscow, which was some ridiculous journey. Yeah, but there he was. So anyway, there's a lot to it, of course. Okay, anything else?
Frank, what the heck are we on?
Yeah.
Because this is an interesting thing. Can you use your emotions to train yourself to watch thoughts more effectively? Like, how emotions seem to rise up every 2 minutes, like almost by themselves, out of nothingness. Sit there for a while. First I'm thinking I'm having a great tea. This is nice. I feel great. And then suddenly my knees hurt. Suddenly I want to hurt my neighbor. It's just like, sorry. I love my neighbors, of course.
It's just sort of hitching ourselves to the great work, right? And then it's just the awareness of being aware of what is arising. So you don't have to do, artificial attempt to kind of harness your emotions to anything. Just the recognition of the emotions is harnessing those emotions.
Okay, all right. So I'm sorry. Okay. So basically what you're saying is that even though, let's say back to your issue with overthinking, my father was Jesuit educated and things like that. It was like, which is great actually, 8 languages, speaking fluently, but of course, lots of alcohol to tame his monkey mind on amphetamines. So it's just like, doing, so the Tantra, being able to just relax into something. Yeah, Frank, thank you. Can you just expound on that a little bit more?
It's maybe a little bit of the difference, just to conclude. The new schools say that we do these practices in order to realize or release our inner radiance. The old schools, the Nyingma, say that we're having this inner radiance right now. And so we practice on that inner radiance from the get-go. I've explained it sometimes as the difference between Mahamudra and Dzogchen, which is just my reading, just understand, so take it with a big grain of salt. But it's like in Mahamudra, we're seeing we're looking at we're aware of its pure awareness of the appearances, whatever they are. But in Dzogchen, it's pure awareness of the awareness itself.
Okay, yeah, that sounds really interesting. So I'm still not aware of the awareness itself too often. I have moments where it feels like I've been punched and knocked down, but not very often. So literally catching yourself while you're thinking the thought, like you're seeing your monkey mind move around if you're thinking about lunch, or it's most likely you're thinking of ultimate causality, being a Jesuit educated person. And you can, so I go, oh, I'm thinking of ultimate causality, and and wondering if that's mindfulness, and that helps you.
No, that's just thinking. That is distraction.
Okay, that's just distraction.
This is what's special about Buddhism, is it is about realization.
Okay.
It's about realization. So the thought of realization is not realization. And so it's like in Dzogchen, just sit there and just, you're just going to relax the mind and don't play with all these things. And you'll find yourself having a thought like, oh, look, I'm thoughtless right now. But that's a thought.
Okay, so I guess I didn't say it right, but just knowing you're having that thought, like being aware of the thought, like, oh, I'm having this thought, isn't, you're just, okay.
Mindfulness, right? We start out with mindfulness, and mindfulness is a little artificial. We have an artificial object, and we're just going to mind in the word mindfulness. The root in there is actually to remember. So you're just remembering on the object again and again and again, like our breath. So you can't see that one, but it's an object of meditation. We're being mindful, and then we're practicing awareness, but this is leading us into awareness. What's the awareness? The awareness is when I realize, oh, I've forgotten the object. So if you're, like if you're counting your breath, right? We're going to count up to 10 and then start counting to 10 again. And suddenly you find you don't know what number you're on. You've lost your mindfulness. The fact that you recognize that you lose your mindfulness is awareness. Gar Rinpoche says it's like a burning incense stick, that little burning nub, that's the awareness. And you touch the mindfulness, and there you go. You're back to awareness. So then that's what we're doing. We're using mindfulness to catch ourselves as being unaware, basically. And that's awareness. We're aware that we're unaware. Eventually, the Vipassana, the mindfulness goes away, and we're just practicing awareness. And then there, levels, so to speak. So the mindfulness, and that's the technique. Because rather than thinking about it and wondering, is this a good thought? Is this a bad thought? I mean, all sorts of wonderful thoughts. The great thing about a lot of these texts, too, is that if one has a very active mind thinking, it's great. You can exhaust yourself with this stuff. Go there, like the Gelugpas, 20 years of training before they start the tantric practice. The Nyingma and the Kagyu say, well, the Gelugpa, the Dalai Lama school say, tantra can be dangerous, so we need to get really, really solid in loving kindness and compassion and the understanding of how things work before we start the tantra. But the Nyingma and the Kagyu basically say, yes, there are dangers, but life is short. Let's jump in. So it's like, we shoot people up in the sky. Sometimes they blow up, but everyone says, well, it's sad, but this is a good thing we're doing. Yeah. Okay.
Nice. One last thing.
Absolutely.
Like every once in a while, and it's literally like every 5 or 10 years, all of a sudden this like hyper awareness comes over me, and it's the scariest thing. I get a panic attack basically because I'm like, oh my God, I just realized this whole life that I've been living for all these years, I've been seeing through the eyes of Andrew, and maybe I'm the only one that all of this is an illusion, and I can just end it right now, and maybe I've created all of this, and it's this overwhelming incredible fear, and it's like it's almost like the only way to describe it's like deja vu. It's like this weird sense that it happens very rarely, but then it happened recently, and I just can't. I try to just like forget it and just like move on.
Yeah. There are different experiences that one has even through valid insights. One Lama talked about it can even be a fearful thing, because people feel this. We think our whole stability and happiness is this ego, and when you see it dissolve, even for a moment, what do? We pinch ourselves. Like you wake up in the middle of the night and you don't know where you are, or who you are, or what, and we say we pinch ourselves, bring us back down. The wonderful thing about, again, meeting great teachers, reading the text, is you realize fundamentally this is positive. And then there's support, there's support, which is really good. So people can have all sorts of experiences, but you learn to look at the nature of those experiences. Fundamentally, you can't fall out of the universe. And to know that Buddha's nature is totally positive, and you start to understand why he hesitated to teach, because it's subtle, and we are so wired towards spinning things around our ego. At the at the end in China and Japan in the monasteries, let's see, at the end of the day, they have this chant they do. All beings without number I vow to liberate. Endless blind passions I vow to uproot. Dharma gates without limit I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha I vow to attain. Just keep going. When you really start reading the teachings on rebirth, you realize there's no out anyway. You know, we are here, and that's going to be a really scary thing because it's like no exit. What do you know? But that's the kind of concern, fear, insight that leads one into looking for real answers, and that's exactly what the Buddha Dharma deals with.
I feel imprisoned in my own body and where I'm going. Like, I feel like I have no control anymore.
Yeah.
It's pretty scary.
But you actually do have control without knowing it. Those are the teachings on karma, purifying the mind. So you can start with some of the basic meditations, and those fears will come up, but they will have less power. You start to see them as just mind moments, not having the reality of the power, the deeper power of your mind. Okay? All right. We dedicate this evening's discussion, consideration, and practice to all motherly sentient beings. May we never stop from the path of liberating ourselves and leading all beings to Buddhahood. Swaha. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. A little disjointed tonight. I was sort of
Frank, you were
all over
totally
this book,
amazing. You were amazing.
and I'm not familiar with the Shakpa Kagyu, so it was a little bit different in its approach.
It must be kind of nice to have it set in a different vernacular.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Pretty sweet. And Frank, you're totally amazing.